Hey, so today we're going to discover just how unfair God really is.
We're talking about the parable of the vineyard workers. And Jesus kind of turns the whole idea of fairness upside down. So that's what we're talking about on HC Daily.
You're listening to another episode of HC Daily, a daily devotional podcast that you can listen to at home or on the go. We believe that you can grow as much as you want to grow spiritually, and this podcast can be a part of your daily growth plan. So, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify or your favorite podcast app, we're glad you're here. Now, let's join our hosts, Jeff Forrester and Chris Zarbaugh, in the studio.
Okay, Chris. So I was thinking we've been doing a bunch of competitions lately for a thing that's coming up in the fall.
Yeah, on video.
On video, yeah. And I was just thinking, are you a good driver?
It depends on what you mean by the word good, because good is pretty subjective.
Well, how do you perceive the word good?
Well, a race car driver is good.
Uh-huh. That's true.
Right? But
Yeah,
he
yeah.
may not be safe.
Yes.
So I don't think
So
that
you
I'm
view
the safe.
safe as good driver.
Well, you can interchange a bunch of things.
Okay,
But what I'm
uh-huh.
saying is,
Yeah.
like, skilled is also good.
Yes.
So it depends on your definition of good.
Right.
If safety is your highest value, then I don't think I'm that good of a
You're not
driver.
that guy? Yeah. Are you a fast driver or are you a distracted driver?
Yeah, I'm way too fast. I'm not distracted. I try really, really hard to, even if I make a call, I put it on the speakerphone and everything else. So I don't think it's that, but I do think that, it's when we did the personality profile types, we did strengths finders, and Mike Daphne came in and he looked at my strength finder profile and he said, I could already tell you're the kind of guy when you drive, you anticipate. Like, this guy's going to go slower. I'm going to go in front of this guy.
Yeah.
You anticipate on the road the best possible way to change lanes and get ahead. Yeah. And I thought, how do you know that from my personality profile? And he said, I could just tell, based on your strengths. Yeah. So all that to say, that's who I am. It's not necessarily, I'm not unsafe. I don't think I'm unsafe.
Right.
But I would say my kids and my daughters, they'd ride that right lane.
Oh.
And I'd say, just get out. You have another half a mile.
You don't have to stay in the right lane with all the sheep.
Then get back in. Right. And they're like, no, it's too, they would consider that unsafe.
Yeah. So, Chad Asman, he's on our staff.
Yeah.
And he's a good driver. He's a safe driver like that.
Yeah.
But he's just learned when we're together, he can't drive because he's that guy. He stays in that right lane. He'll come up and he'll get up behind somebody, sit there, and then check all three mirrors, look over his shoulder, and then change lane. I'm like, why haven't you already been looking in your mirrors? You should be able to look. Just hit that gap. Right. So you should always know where everybody is and just hit the gap.
Right.
Right. And accelerate a little bit. Did you know that if you push that pedal, it goes forward? It makes go. And he's like, shut up. Quit talking to me. And he makes me, so he makes me drive. Because I'm the faster pastor.
Yes.
Yeah, that's me.
Well, when it comes to safety, I'm all about safety, of course, right? So I'll offer safety, especially my kids. When in doubt, don't go, all that kind of stuff. I'm all for
me
it.
too.
But at the same time, when I sit in a car, like, for instance, if Chad were to go unnecessarily slow, I probably wouldn't say it, but in my mind, I would think, thanks for wasting my life. So I only have so many minutes in this life.
Yes, and you just wasted 15 of them.
You just wasted 15, so thanks.
Which is what we've been doing in all these podcasts for, we're coming up almost on our 150th episodes coming up.
Yeah, and there's a change coming too.
And so I don't know that we're talking about that.
Oh.
Are we talking about that yet?
Well, there's something.
Well, I'm super excited about talking about it, but I don't think we're supposed to talk about it now.
Okay, well, let's move on.
Okay, but it's coming.
It is coming.
Yeah. It's going to be cool.
Yeah.
You want to tell him now?
No.
Okay. So we're talking Matthew chapter 19. We've wasted a lot of time. He just complained about people wasting his life, and then we're doing this.
That's usually the same time. Maybe
okay.
20 seconds more.
We're okay? All right. Well, 20 seconds is valuable. So Matthew chapter 20 is where we're at, and we're going to read like the first 16 verses. And look good. So here it is. We're reading from the New Living Translation. It says, Jesus says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early one morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay the normal daily wage and sent them out to work. At 9 o'clock in the morning, he was passing through the marketplace and saw some people standing around doing nothing. So he hired them, telling them that he would pay them whatever was right at the end of the day. So they went to work at the vineyard. At noon and again at 3 o'clock, he did the same thing. At 5 o'clock, that afternoon, he was in town again and saw some more people standing around. He asked them, "Why haven't you been working today?" They replied, "Because no one hired us." The landowner told him, "Then go out and join the others in my vineyard." And that evening, he told the foreman to call the workers in and pay them, beginning with the last workers first. And when those hired at 5 o'clock were paid, each received a full day's wage. When those hired first came to get their pay, they assumed they would receive more, but they too were paid a day's wage. When they received their pay, they protested to the owner. "Those people worked only 1 hour, and yet you've paid them just as much as you paid us, who worked all day in the scorching heat." And he answered one of them, "Friend, I haven't been unfair. Didn't you agree to work all day for the usual wage? Take your money and go. I wanted to pay this last worker the same as you. Is it against the law for me to do what I want with my money? Should you be jealous because I'm kind to others? So those who are last now will be first then, and those who are first will be last."
So this is actually one of my favorite parables and favorite passages in the Bible.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Jesus doesn't even pretend to be fair,
No.
right? In this story, God the Father would be sort of the one who goes out and hires the workers, and so he says, hey, at the end, you agreed to work for a denarius. By the way, a day's wage was a denarius.
Yeah.
So it was a Roman soldier's pay. It was more than generous, which is why Jesus chose this amount. It was very fair, and a person would have agreed to work all day in a vineyard. And it says when he went out early in the morning, it's important to know that the Jewish calendar, the days didn't go from midnight to midnight like our days.
Right.
It actually a day would begin at 6 a.m. and it would go to 6 a.m. And so when it says early in the morning, that means right after 6 a.m. they hired people, and then it continues on. 9 a.m., noon, right? 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then right before the end of the day, which would be 6 p.m. So he goes out at 5 p.m. and hires these last workers and gives the 5 p.m. workers who worked 1 hour a day's wage. And the best part of this story to me is that he doesn't even apologize.
No, not at all.
And he says, listen, I can do what I want with my money.
Yeah.
It's the no apology explanation.
Yeah.
Or actually, I should say the no explanation, right?
Yeah.
And he says, hey, he's unfair.
Fairness, personally, I feel like, is a sort of a juvenile worldview. Andy Stanley says fairness ended at the garden. When Adam and Eve sinned, fairness ended. Right. And, in a perfect world, sure, everything should be fair. I think you and I should work for equity and for fairness as much as we can. But it's not something anybody can ever guarantee. And in this situation, can I point out something that just jumps off the page to me?
Yeah.
So he asks the guys at 5 o'clock, "Why haven't you been working?" He said, "Because no one hired us." He said, "Then go and join the others in my vineyard." That's the last ones. The ones before that, it says he hired them. Verse 4, he hired them, telling them he would pay them whatever was right at the end of the day. Isn't that cool? So the guys that are getting hired in the middle and the end of the day, he's just saying, "I'll just pay you whatever's fair or whatever's reasonable, whatever's right. I'll give you my best shot."
Yeah, you won't be disappointed.
But look at verse 2. Verse 2, it says he agreed to pay the normal daily wage. Apparently, there's a negotiation there. He had a contract with those first guys. If those first guys had just trusted the goodness of this man instead of making demands before they showed up to work, maybe it would have turned out very different for them.
Yeah, it could be that. It could be that.
Right? Because that's the only agreement made is there. The rest is just go work and I'll pay you what's fair or what's reasonable.
And culturally, it was probably common to agree upon the wage early in the morning, but it is so unbelievably uncommon to go out and find somebody at 3 o'clock and then say work for 3 hours until the evening hits.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think not only does he say, "I'll pay you what's fair," but you know what I also believe? I believe that everybody is hanging on every word that he's telling, and people are wondering, what is the guy at 3 p.m. going to get? Because Jesus is a master storyteller.
Yes. Oh, it's brilliant.
So he says he hired him at 3, and he'll pay him what's right. Ooh, I wonder that's so unusual, right? And they're wondering. And so at the end of the story, it's not just the fictional people in the story of the parable, but it's also the listeners who are sort of probably even thinking, well, that's not fair. You paid the 5 o'clock guy a denarius,
Yeah.
and they're waiting for the end of the story. Jesus gives the punchline, and the listeners, that's who the story was for. They're probably thinking, well, that's not fair at all. Well, see, here's what it comes down to. Not only does God never pretend to be fair, the story reveals to us that he is incredibly unfair to our favor.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Jesus is unfair in our favor.
Yeah.
Because the very last thing that we would ever want is for God to be fair.
Right.
Because if we got what we truly deserved, right? If we truly were to, get what we deserve for our sin and our rebellion and our state, like, we don't want that. We don't want eternal separation from God. We don't want to pay the payment that sin demands, which is death.
Yeah.
And so God gives to us both mercy and grace. Mercy is the thing that spares us. Grace is the thing that favors us.
Yes.
Right? So that, he decides to not give us what we deserve. That's the mercy part.
Yeah.
But then he decides to give us what we don't deserve,
Right.
which is called grace.
Right.
And so the last thing that any of us would want is for God to be fair. God says, I unapologetically am saying to you that I am unfair,
Right.
but I am incredibly unfair to your favor.
Right. Unfair, yes. Unreasonable, no.
No.
Right? So Warren Wiersbe, he kind of says the same thing you say in the notes. He just used fewer words. He said...
Well, he had to. You know why?
Because he was really intelligent.
He had editors. He had editors that demanded
Oh,
it.
is that it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I thought it's because he was really smart. But anyways, it says, the lesson for Christ's disciples is obvious. We should not serve him because we want to receive an expected reward, and we should not insist on knowing what he will do. God is infinitely generous and gracious and will always give us better than we deserve. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So sometimes we come to God and go,
I like the way I said it.
yeah, I'm sure you did. Listeners really enjoyed
I'm
Dr.
sure you
Wiersbe.
That's great.
But so what Dr. Wiersbe is saying here is that the people, it's I lost my train of thought. Our temptation, I think, sometimes is to say, God, I'll serve you if you do this or that. And if we do that, if we start to make demands on God, we're running the risk of having an agreement that is far less than the blessing God will give us if we just trust him, right? And then I think when we start to try to negotiate with God, we're trying to maintain some level of control instead of trusting that God is infinitely more gracious and generous to us than we could ever think to negotiate with him. So why don't we just why don't we serve him willingly and receive his gifts, graciously, and he will always do far more and far better for us than we deserve. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And it reminds me of all the times where, when you're faced with a tough choice to do what is right over doing what is wrong, you want to be recognized for your integrity. You want to be recognized for, doing the right thing. And you hope that God would sort of work it out. Like, I'm going to make the right choice and God better come through for me. And there are times in our lives where we do what is right and we don't get recognized, we don't get promoted, or perhaps we pay the price for doing what's right over doing what might be easy.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't get the reward.
Yeah.
But there's more than just, our desired outcome or our reward, which would translate into a denarius. There's more than that. Because God always gets the glory, we get the benefit, and sometimes the benefit is character, sometimes the benefit is spiritual growth, sometimes the benefit is the furthering of the kingdom or impacting of lives. But we have to understand that God says his word never returns to him void. Nothing we do will ever be in vain. So 1 Corinthians 15:58. Be steadfast. I memorized it in the Old English version.
Always abounding in the work of the Lord.
Yeah, for as much as you know that your labor in the Lord shall never be in vain.
That's right.
So when we work for God, make the right choices, and all those different things, just know that reward should not be our motivation.
Right.
But it's always going to be valuable.
Well,
God's
he offers
always
the
going to
reward.
recognize it.
He offers the reward for motivational purposes, certainly. Hey, there's a reward. Don't give up. Peter brings up the reward multiple times. But we shouldn't love God because he's going to reward us.
Right.
Right? We pursue God and pursue God's things. And then God says, I'm not going to forget you. I'm going to take care of you, bud. Right? That's what he's doing. So, he ends this with, so those who are last now will be first then, and those who are first will be last. Jesus says a phrase similar to that a few times in the New Testament. The first will be last, and the last shall be first. And there's one story. It's not in what we read today, but there's a story where Jesus says, if you ever go into a dinner, and all the fancy important people sit at the head of the table, he said, don't go sit at the head of the table, because they might make you move if more important people come in.
Right.
He said, go sit down at the end of the table. It's far better to be invited up with the important people than it would be to be asked to move out of the way of important people, right? So he says it. So here's a quick story. I had an opportunity back when I was a much more active musician, a trumpet player. I got invited to join to audition for a group that just phenomenal, just a tremendous group. And when I showed up, the director had solicited me to show up to audition for the first chair. And a couple people that were in the band had bragged on me and go, oh, he's just really, really great. And I'm driving in thinking, this is an opportunity. I just can't believe this amazing opportunity. And I'm really kind of satisfied with the fact that I got invited to try out, really feeling good about myself. But as I'm pulling into the driveway of this place, I felt like, and I haven't had God do this very many times, but I felt like God just kind of whispered and said, don't sit at the head of the table.
Mm-hmm.
Go sit down at the end of the table and let him invite you up. So when I walked in, the guy hands me first chair music. And I said, you know what? I really don't know much about your band. Why don't I just take third, go sit down at the end, and I'll just figure it out, and then we'll see what we agree to. He goes, okay. He hands me the music. I go sit down. And the director's like, here's a piece we're going to play. 1, 2, 3, bam. And we go, and it just goes crazy. It's one of the hardest pieces of music I've ever seen in my life. We get done, and I lean over to the guy sitting next to me. I was like, man, that was incredible. And he goes, I know. I said, I've never even seen that music before. He said, oh, neither is anybody else in the band. We were just sight reading it.
Wow.
Which meant the first chair was playing stuff so far beyond my head, right? So then when it was all done, the director comes and said, Jeff, you did a fine job. That's great. Man, I'd love to have you be. And I said, you know what? What do you really, really need? And he needed a different instrument. And I said, I'll learn how. I don't have it, but I'll learn how to play it. And he's like, that'd be great. And I did 56 concerts with them all around the U.S., sitting with the most amazing musicians that I could not keep up with any other way. But he let me join this band.
What'd you play?
I wound up playing a tenor horn, is what it is, an E-flat instrument. And sat right in the middle of this band and played all these concerts with these incredible musicians that had I gone in and pushed to the front and made my demands first, I would have embarrassed myself and never been able to be a part of this incredible band. So Jesus uses that phrase often. He's not using it specifically in the context I just told the story, but he uses this phrase, those who are last will be first, and those who will be first will be last. Jesus always expects a certain amount of humility when we approach the blessings of God, when we approach the opportunities in our life. Be humble, right?
Hey, I too have a quick story, although it has fewer words and
it's probably not. Well, it's probably not as good as mine.
No, it's better.
We'll see.
So
we'll let our listeners be the judge of that. You guys tell us in the comments.
Well, it's my child, so you're going to lose on that one. So what happens is I went to pick up Sarah, my daughter. She's only 5 years old, at her school, and I was late, and I felt super bad because she was the last one to be picked up, and she was out there with her teacher, and that never happened with us. I think it only happened that one time, and I pulled up, and I felt so bad, and I said, Sarah, I'm so sorry that you had to wait because nobody likes to be last. And I said, hey, listen, the last will be first and the first shall be last. I told her this when she was 5. Well, about a year later, she's going to get baptized. She becomes a Christian. I had the privilege of baptizing her. And there was like 6 people getting baptized in the service, and she was last. And so afterwards, I had talked with her, and I said, hey, I'm really sorry that they put you last in line. And she said, well, that's okay, Dad. She says, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And I said, what? And I had totally forgotten that I had mentioned that to her. And I said, where in the world did you learn that? She said, from you. She said, when you picked me up and you told me that. And I said, okay, but the fact that you remembered it. She's 6 years old.
Sure.
And she said, yeah. She goes, I've always remembered that. Yeah. And so my story wins because it's cute.
So let me get this right. Your story is centered around your failures as a parent, and that supersedes the Lord speaking to me and telling me to be careful about.
Yeah. How God redeems like mistakes and brings cuteness out of it. Yeah.
Hey, we think that your 6-year-old daughter was probably very cute, but.
Yep, I win.
Well, he's a failure as a dad, but whatever. That's his story.
Yep.
So I think we should wrap it up here because it's getting, and if we talk much more, I think we're going to spill the beans on what's coming up next.
Oh yeah, because we're going to do that new thing.
Yeah, but I don't want to talk about it now.
Yeah, so let's tease. We weren't planning on doing this, but let's tease the listeners a little bit.
Oh.
Yeah, and have them wonder, like, what is coming?
Ooh.
Yeah, kind of exciting.
Like some new things.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be fun.
We're gonna jazz up the show a little bit.
Yeah, we are, which we're very excited about because we think at 150 episodes, jazzing it up is what's required.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's gonna be able to maybe help get the word out to more people.
I think so too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, we'll see you next time for the Parables of Jesus on HC Daily.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please help us spread the word by liking this episode and sharing it on your social media platforms. Be sure to leave a comment and review, and don't forget to give us 5 stars. When you do, you help us reach even more people who need a daily devotional like HC Daily. If you'd like to hear more from Chris and Jeff, they're both teaching pastors at Heritage Church, located in Southeast Michigan. You can get more of their messages by clicking on the Messages tab at heritagechurch.com. Be sure to join us again soon for another episode of HC Daily.